Hello, everyone. This is Linda Westfall from the Software Excellence Academy, powered by the Westfall team. Our sponsor for today's webinar is the ASQ Software Division, and I'm very pleased to welcome back one of my gurus from the day, Tom Gilb. He's going to be talking about deliver value with real Agile.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome. If you want a quick copy of the slides, there's your QR code. There's the link. You're going to want the slides if you're curious enough and want to go into depth to follow up. I'll do this QR code at the end too. Linda also has a copy. She'll make that available. The second slide is a light board. And what you can see from this are all the slides. And you can see that, as usual, I can't resist putting a lot in each slide. The good news is I'm going to get through all of them, but I'm only going to sample one cool idea per slide and then leave it to you if you want to go back and pick up more information than I can possibly give in 1 hour. So to start with, I'm going to talk about Agile. And this is a list of attributes of successful entrepreneurs. It's a very long list. And my point is, I think we need to be interested in this list of things more than just being agile. I think we've over-focused on Agile and under-focused on all these other good things. So here's flexibility. I guess that's sort of Agile put in its place. Many of you will know the Einstein quotation that we suffer from a perfection of means and a confusion of aims. Main problem. We still have the problem, almost 100 years later. Agile is a means. And we do not focus enough on the ends. Agile is secondary to the main theme of this talk, delivering value. Okay? So I want to encourage you to shift your focus and I'm going to help you in the talk to do it, that we need to shift to a focus on business results or project results, however you want to formulate it, and with or without Agile, okay? I think at best, Agile helps us tune the efficiency of our projects, but what matters is the delivery of value. Here's an old friend of mine, Dr. Deming. I never dared call him anything else, even though we knew each other pretty well. He stresses that an aim, your North Star, your goals, your objectives, never should be defined in terms of agile activity or methods. Always relate to how life is better for everyone. The aim of the system must be clear. I'll talk about clarifying aims in practice with my methods. And the aim is a value judgment. That's my favorite word, deliver value, okay? So to the Agile gang, our friends, most of them I reckon are good friends of mine, even though I haven't always been nice, and I'm not going to be nice about what I say now. I think when I see people on LinkedIn and it says signer of the Agile Manifesto, my first reaction is, after all these years, is that all you have to brag about? If you want to see my detailed, good to hear the laughter, the detailed criticism of the Agile Manifesto, take this link, and I hope you begin to agree with me. It meant well, and it's very good for smaller scale stuff. The problem is it was done with what I call the mentality of a coder, not a systems engineer. And a lot of us have problems that require something at a higher level than a coder mentality, okay, than a techie. And so these guys are doing as well as they can, but they love their coding and they really don't understand this word system. And they think coding is everything, and it's not. I wish I had enough time, but I'm giving it to you. Check out this Peggy Lee singing, "Is That All There Is?" After all these years, so many people, such a long time, in spite of my explicit, well-documented warnings, bought into this Agile stuff. Not you, just your bad professors and institutions of low learning. They should have taught you critical thinking so you recognize that Agile was not the answer. Okay? Now, I love to see when people talk about their methods, give me your case studies, give me your results, show me cause. Then I'm interested. If you just blah, 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 I suspect you of being a patent medicine salesperson, and I turn off the switch and I've got other things to do. So using this particular unleashing the power of Scrum and Agile methodology revolutionizing the business as an example, I asked for some information, and it's got blah, 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 faster time to market and flexibility and adaptability. But notice all words, no numbers, no case studies. Okay. Here's Greta talking to the big politicians about build back better. Build what? Back where? Better how? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So if I take just one of these things and I underline all the words that are ambiguous, that can be interpreted in multiple ways, for which there is no definition presented with this, get a hell of a lot of words underlined. In fact, a few days ago, I decided to go one step further. I asked Perplexity, I think it was, to count the ambiguous words, 77%. Here's the list of them. And then there's these less ambiguous words, all the rest of them, like, what is Agile? Do we agree? Okay. So I even asked it to go a little bit further. I said, what's the probability that any two people would understand the same thing? And I remembered there's something called combinatorial mathematics when I was a kid, and I got it calculated. And here's you trying to understand Agile from these words. Good luck. And there are an astronomical number of potential interpretations. So it's highly improbable that anyone would understand the intended by the author combination. Okay. In fact, you got the same probability of understanding this stuff as finding a specific atom in the Milky Way. So I wanted some real solid case studies from businesses that give measurable results. And here's what I got. Blah, 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 blah. I got some links, but they weren't the case studies that gave any measurable business results. Well, that's normal, but that's the best I could do. Maybe you can do better. Do send me the great results here. Here's case number 7. Same problem, blah, 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 blah. Here's the detail. Oh, look at that yellow stuff. It enables rapid innovation and experimentation. How rapid? What does innovation mean? What does enabling mean? Oh my God, I can't possibly understand this stuff. So, if you think you can research better and find better evidence that your favorite form of Agile is really cool for giving great business results, please send it to me and I'll shut up. Anyway, what is your priority these days? To be Agile or deliver value? Guess what I think it should be. Okay. So let's take an extreme case. You're not allowed to do Agile anymore under pain of death or losing your job. Oh dear, we're already there. What if we focus totally on delivered value and did it? Do you think we'd keep our jobs? So what is value? Now, the moment I say that word, I know that a lot of people think it means financial value and profit. It does, but it has a lot of other meanings. It's all the many stakeholders who have many qualities and values, most of which are actually not how much money you earn. That's a very narrow-minded MBA type of thinking. MBAs aren't very good at this. That's why they're useless in business and doom the business to failure. Here's a little map you're going to see more than once. I call it the penta, where the values are highlighted. The resources are also highlighted. We don't talk enough about that. This is, in simple terms, people, time, and money. And the efficiency we talk even less about. That's the values divided by the resources, the ratio, or also known as profitability, if you insist on putting it in business terms. And then there's this other forgotten thing, the art of design. If you want low costs and you want high values, you get it by designing it. Everybody knows that for thousands of years, but we don't in IT. Design sort of magically emerges, and we don't have designers and all kinds of other silly things. Grow up. Look at the rest of the world outside of IT and MBAs. Okay? I'd like you to meet a Danish guy called Bent. I got a Danish friend of mine to pronounce his last name. I say Flyvbjerg. Sounds like in Nordic fly mountain, but the Danish, I didn't understand the pronunciation at all, so I'm just going to call him Bent. Bent's a really interesting guy, and if you haven't read his book, How Big Things Get Done, I highly recommend it. Now, he has a database in Oxford of 16,000 projects, some of them IT, some of them management, some of them building roads, okay? And he reckons that 99.5% of them fail either in meeting the deadline, meeting the budget, or delivering the benefits. Now, since everybody's doing Agile after 20 years, what percentage of the 16,000 projects are using Agile? Does that mean Agile maybe fails 99.5% of the time? Or does it mean that the few projects really using Agile are the only ones that succeed? Bent has a wonderful little way of putting it, his iron law of mega projects. Over time, over budget. Remember the over here, over sexed US military in Europe? Over time, over budget, under benefits, over and over again. Anyway, he analyzes this and he identifies the antidotes to the iron law. And one of them is called realistic planning. Yeah, it's called maybe a form of waterfall before you begin the Agile. Not allowed. We gave that up long ago. Okay. What about high quality people on your teams who really know what they're doing in, for example, planning and designing and architecture and things like that? And what about getting realistic plans? Okay. Anyway, what about better early warning signals to figure out that things are going wrong? Here's the wonderful chart of all his 16,000 projects. Half of them overran the budget. Well, that will surprise nobody, I'm sure. But in addition, 8.5% were on budget and on time. In other words, over 90% were either not on budget or not on time. And 0.5% were under budget, on time, and they delivered the benefits. What a marvelous idea, really delivering the benefits. Now, if you deliver the benefits and spend 10 times as much time and money, maybe the return on investment ain't going to be what somebody said it would be. So these things are actually pretty important. Trivial overruns we can talk about, but you know, and I know that sometimes it's a factor of 3.14. Everybody says it'll be a piece of cake, and it turns out to be pie. You got it. Okay, so focusing on the critical values is what he recommends, same as I'm recommending. He never once mentioned Scrum or any form of agility being useful at all for success. Time to give it up. It's not correlated with reality. Never was. Okay? But of course, we Agilists are the kind who like to take a 2-day course learning absolutely nothing useful, get a certification, and then get some work as product owner or something like that. Well, those days are gone. Our game is up. Time to turn to the new game in town, fooling people into thinking you're really giving them results. Maybe if you're into that fooling people into discipline. Enough of bashing Agile. Hope some people got some insights. Some people probably angry at me, but I've been doing it for 20 years and can document it. Anyway, I'm going to talk about my methods now. Planguage, my planning language, which I've been using for decades. Evo, which is what we called Agile before people decided to call incremental, and called it evolutionary, really, and we shortened it to Evo. Evo is an acronym for early value optimization. And I'm going to talk about Agile engineering, because our problem is we did the Agile, but we didn't do it in a disciplined and result-focused enough way. And that, in my humble opinion, requires engineering. Okay? So let me offer you a free book on Agile as it should have been. I just wrote it this year. It's called Evo. I'm going to give you some samples from the book, but absolutely free book on Agile as it could be for you if you want to succeed in delivering results. We're going to go through this cycle more. Here is symbolically a big strategy being decomposed into smaller strategies and delivering more value, plus more value, plus more value, plus more value. Not quite getting to our goal yet, so we need some more design, some more Evo steps. We'll get to that. Now, I'm 84 years old. I started at IBM at 17 years old. Yes, they hired me at 17. Sweet 17. Anyway, by 1960, I had 16 of experience doing real Agile, like 20 steps of delivery of results to my clients with totally new technology. And I learned that it worked to deliver increments of value and then push on and deliver more increments of value. So I wrote a book called Software Metrics, 1976 in Europe. That's the US edition, 77. And I recently went back to it and I found page 214 and I read this. Let me read it to you. A complex system will be most successful if it is implemented in small steps. I know you believe that. That's good. And if each step has a clear measure of results. Did you know that? You do your sprints and you measure with numbers, no excuses. What do you measure? The stakeholder values that you've promised to deliver, the benefits. And by the way, if that little doesn't work, then might be smart to be able to back up to where you were to a previous successful step. I'm very proud of that. That is a great description of Agile as it should have been, but my Agile friends, and they often credit my books for inspiring them to do Agile in writing, they did the small steps bit, but they didn't do anything else. And that's the reason for the failure of Agile, in my humble opinion. Now, 9 years later, in 1985, using an Apple Mac and having fun, I wrote more about it in a widely cited early 1985 article in the Association for Computing Machinery Software Engineering Notes. And so here is my way of presenting Agile compared to other methods, just for fun. You can actually get this paper on my site at ResearchGate, and you'll probably find a reference to it in the back of these slides. Now, I like to summarize all of the sub-methods I use. In the competitive engineering book, there are 10 sub-methods, and one of them is this little EVO thing, the Agile thing. And so I've got 10 principles here, but I'm only going to show you one, and you're going to have to go back and read the others if you're interested. But it basically is a prioritization rule. It says your next step should give you the best result you can get. That's interesting. You'll see later that Hewlett-Packard adopted that and thought it was very good advice at the end of the talk here. Here's the EVO cycle again. It's really is a plan, do, study, act from Deming, but we enlarged it a little bit with things he doesn't have there, but we think they're quite useful. Here's a detailed overview of what it is. Recently, I've recognized that this cycle is fractal. I had to look up the definition too. And it's scale free, which is very interesting when you're trying to scale up and your Agile doesn't work. And you say, do we need to go to SAFe? And the answer is not with my methods. Same method at any scale. Okay, details. If you see something in square brackets with a name in it, that's a reference to a free downloadable book at the end of the slides. Here is the part of the cycle called measure, not say, did we finish the sprint, but what happened measurably in terms of stakeholder values. Can we measure that they got what we thought we would get? Okay. And the thing about measurement, a lot of people get hung up in much too perfect, much too costly, unnecessarily sophisticated measures. Rough measures that you're moving ahead are generally good enough, and they are cheap and they are simple. I had one client who in weekly cycles said, we will never use more than half an hour to measure anything we do at a cycle. And they're extremely successful case study. Here's a set of ideas that basically are talking about something I alluded to briefly earlier. I believe, and I have learned, that the idea of building a system from scratch and then saying it can be released 1 year later, 2 years later, that's a bad idea. No matter how bad, how awful your existing system is, I found that normally, with very few exceptions, it pays off to start from where you are, no matter how bad it is, and start incrementing priority improvements, the most important things that are hurting the most, and move towards, after a large number of steps, maybe 50 steps in 1 year, weekly steps, move towards a gloriously much better system. And every step gives a result and proves that you know what you're doing, gives confidence, gets backup and motivation and enthusiasm to fund your project. Okay. One reason of 10 is this approach forces the developers to recognize they're dealing with a multifaceted live system with people and culture and data and not just the code, with all stakeholders, and to experience the basic system culture. Think about that. Big idea. Okay. Another thing I'd like to talk about is this method does what we've talked about in Agile, but not done very well. And it's sensing that we have problems early. Could be a problem with the people, the lack of training, the motivation, the data, the code. It could be anything, but you need to sense that you have problems early and do something about it early, get it straightened out, and then move on. So the thing that gives us good sensing problems early is not that we test that the functionality is correct, TDD or something like that. We implement our increments in a real system with real people and real data and real crazy problems and get it to work in the real system. Then we sense real problems really early. Here's a little area of the cycle I call pivoting, which, as you know, means big problem. We got to really change things, like major change to the architecture. Okay. And any change in requirements, and if you wonder what I think requirements are, here's a map. Here's the free book and glossary for it. It is not user stories. Forget it. You got to be joking. And it's a lot of performance requirements, which is a lot of quality requirements, and they are quantified, and a lot of constraints and other things. Okay, you want to go deeply into requirements. This is your baby. But one single change to any part of these requirements can have a butterfly effect, meaning you got to change everything you thought. Okay, and that multi-year commitment in a contract to some safe supplier or SAS supplier is in fact invalid, and you can't back out of it. Darn. Okay, so you need to be, this is what I showed you earlier. If it doesn't work, you got to be able to back up without great penalty in money or contracts or anything else. There may come a point where for example, let's say you wanted to achieve 99.99999% availability. Sounds nice. It just happens to be outside the state of the art in software, according to my very good expert sources. Okay, so you ain't going to get there. And now you can keep on doing your project forever, for 10 years, weekly, and you move up little bit each time, but you never get there. So the project becomes an eternal project with infinite costs. That's stupid. There comes a point where you have to admit that the ambition levels were outside the scope of reality, outside the state of the art. And there comes a time when you need to stop. You need to stop when you're still profitable. You don't keep on using resources for marginal effects. Okay? So if you use this method, stop when you reach your limitations on profitability and limitation of the state of the art, what that means is that large failures are impossible structurally. You look at the many case studies, and I'm going to give you some, from large corporations, example, Hewlett-Packard, that use my methods. They do not speak about large failures of any of the projects ever. They're amongst the 0.5% that succeed. Always have been. I've always known that. Never heard anything different. Anything else is, in fact, you're not practicing the method. Okay? So if you'd like to run a shop where large failures are impossible, here's a hint. Use this method, detect the point where it pays off to stop the entire project, and stop. I had a meeting today with a pretty smart young man who's running a business of selling strategic improvement to people. And he mumbles something about meeting the market requirements. And I said, stop a moment. What? I know that sounds nice and it sounds right, but you know what? Your projects cannot just meet, quote, market requirements. You have to meet what are known as stakeholder requirements. And most of your stakeholders are not the market, the customer, the user. They are nasty little things like the European Union laws on privacy, and we will fine you $800 million and lock you out of the market, Google, Apple, if you're not nice people. Okay? So now, guess what? I'm going to give you my free book, the only detailed book on the subject ever written. And you can go deep and you can become an expert on this idea of stakeholder. It's a primary idea for succeeding and not failing. You analyze your stakeholders and their values in depth to get your requirements. Then you have a proper set of requirements. Okay? Then you have reduced the probability of failing in front of a critical stakeholder, which can kill your entire project, even if all the other stakeholders are happy. Okay, so please, at least get the darn free book and at least scan it. And at some point, you might say, I'd better go into some more depth here. We can't have this user this, user that, user stories, use cases, UX. We've over-focused on the U and we've forgotten the S. We need to have stakeholder stories and stakeholder engineering and things like that, okay? Critical stakeholders, one of them alone can ruin your whole day, like an atomic bomb. Now, here's a little example. I asked Perplexity to give me 3 sets of 10 stakeholders for startups, for UK medical assistance and some other things. Here they are, 1, 2, 3. Now, notice something. I didn't start pretending I knew anything about medical assistance to the unemployed or startup for education. I know that Perplexity will give me better lists than I can generate or even most people can generate. So I've gotten in the habit, maybe some of you are too, of asking my favorite AI tool to give me a list of stakeholders. Now, if something's missing, we can add it. If something's extraneous, we can delete it. Okay? But I think it's a good practice to double check your understanding of stakeholders using an AI tool. They're very good at it. I also said, name the most critical value. Remember the title of this talk, Delivering Values? Name the most critical value that each stakeholder has. And it's here. Here's a little bit more detail of the first one. Here's one stakeholder called nonprofit organizations. Here is their value, effective support for vulnerable populations. Now, wait a minute. What does support mean? What populations are vulnerable? What is effective? Coming up. So then I asked my favorite tool to do another Planguage thing, which you can read about in detail. I said, generate me from your list of those stakeholders and their values. Take the top, probably got about 15 or 20, I forget exactly, 20. Take the top 20 values. Here they are. Give me some blah, blah, blah about it so managers understand it, like minimize adverse events. Then do the serious engineering. Define a scale of measure. Define a means to test or measure whether we reached it. Give me the worst acceptable case for delivery of the system, the tolerable level. Give me the goal, the success level within 3 years. This is Planguage. By the way, what percentage of the stakeholders will be happy if we achieve the goal for the safety requirement? It says here about 1%. Oh dear, that's interesting. So we got to do some other goals to make other people happy. Here's a little enlargement of that, but you can just, most of the AI systems know my Planguage. You can just say Gilb's Planguage or something like that. And if that fails, you can take my free PDF copy of my books and read them in, and then it will know in detail how to do it. You can just ask, you don't have to go on a course to learn my methods, okay? AI already is more expert at it than most human beings. So use it. You can begin to understand what's going on by asking AI to provide it for you and then being critical and tuning things to your client. I started asking what I thought was an interesting question. How many quality requirements, remember we had 20, do we need to do to satisfy our stakeholders? And I said, well, if you do 15 of those 20, you will satisfy 85 to 90% of the stakeholders. I said, wait a minute, you will not satisfy 15% of the stakeholders? They will cancel your project and defund you and fire you? Yep, that's right, only 15. You want to go up to between 15 and 20, you get a much higher number here. You probably don't want to go to 100 quality requirements because it probably costs too much and it'll give you just marginal set. But there's a very interesting concept here. How many quality requirements or value requirements do you need to satisfy all the critical stakeholders so you don't fail? Wow, that's interesting. Here's a little table it generated. Gives you some idea. Okay. So how many values have you quantified for your projects? I'll bet you're in the gonna fail for most of the stakeholders level because you haven't even looked at the stakeholders and haven't got enough of the values. Therefore, failure is imminent and guaranteed. Here's a little tool I call an impact estimation table. Sorry. And here's the basic idea. We have some strategies, they're detailed here, and we have some objectives, they're detailed here, and we rate on some scale of measure the effectiveness of each strategy on each value, okay? And that's a way of doing engineering thinking about complex systems like the ones you have to build and be a project manager for, okay? Here's another view of the same thing, except I've taken 3 requirements generated by, here's the goal level, here's the scale of measure, here they're referenced by their tag, okay? Then I've asked the same Perplexity to generate me some good strategic ideas. This is at the management level, not the coder level. This is at the systems level. And here they are, sustainability initiatives. And here are the ratings, like percentage of probability that you're going to reach the goal, 80%. Hey, that's good. Okay. Here's a little accumulation. If I do this strategy and that strategy and that strategy, I get a nice high number, making me feel very comfortable that maybe I have enough strategies to get there. Okay. This is Planguage in a nutshell. Okay, here's the Planguage or planning language for requirements. Here's engineering requirements. Here are ideas or strategies or solutions or architecture. Here is a multi-dimensional view. So we can choose, for example, what is the most effective strategy and why don't we do it first in early steps? Prioritization computing. So I've always believed that we should plan early frequent increases long before anybody was seriously talking about that. And I have a name for them. Now, you would probably call them sprints, but I think we need to delete that terminology because it stands for a lot of misuse of methods. But I call it an EVO step. And an EVO step is defined as a thing not taking too much time. We can discuss whether it's a week or a day or 2 weeks. And when you do it to a real system, it delivers a real increment in a value. And if this is your goal level and you reach that, that's good, but not good enough. So you need to deliver another one and another one and another one until you reach your goal, and then you stop designing and stop coding and stop testing and stop delivering because you've done it. This is the definition of done. Definition of done is you have reached your value goals and or you have run out of resources and you got no people, time, and money to do anything, and then you have to stop for that reason. Now, here, generated by Perplexity, is an impact estimation table, except this time I've said, take a big strategy and subdivide it into sub-strategies, each one of which gives some good stuff to the set of values. Here's the total, 5.9% of the way to the goal for tech-enhanced learning, okay? And by the way, what's the highest number here? Is it 7.1? Yeah, that's industry partnerships. Why don't we do that first? Okay, why don't we subdivide it, 0.9, into industry partnerships that impact networking opportunities? There is your first step of 100 steps, giving the most value for money. So we're now using the impact estimation table not merely to evaluate in multiple dimensions the architectures or strategies, but we're using it to evaluate the sprints, the steps in engineering fashion. And this is completely, you can be completely generated better than most human beings can do using Perplexity by just asking with a nice prompt. Let me very quickly put in this idea constraints, which is talked about too little. I was delighted when I recently discovered Fred Brooks wrote another book called The Design of Design, just before he died, 2010. And he has a whole chapter on constraints because he thinks it's so important. And that chapter mirrors what I wrote about in another book I call Guides, Theory of Guides. There's the link to a free book on depth on constraints if you're interested in theory of constraints. And this just simply symbolizes that there are two major sorts of constraints, scalar ones like not too much or not too little, and binary ones like you gotta do it, you gotta be legal, etc. Okay. Again, this is engineering. You have to master it, or you will fail if you break your constraints. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my concept of design. Okay. Now, if you'd like to look at my general theory of design, which I just wrote this year in 2025 for free, this is a little hello to my academic friends because they don't seem to have a good theory of design. But let me give you the bottom line here with just a nice little picture. Here we have the functionality of it, of your system, and your constraints, by the way. Here we have one value, here we have another value. And theory of design says is that if your design goal is over here and your old system is over here, then you have to plug something in that you might call design or architecture or solutions or smart ideas or creative ideas. It doesn't matter what you call it. Either when you dump it in there, when you introduce it incrementally to your system, either it moves you forward towards your goal or it's worthless. And if it's going to be worthless, you'd better discover it early and back up. If it is worth something, keep it there and say, I still have a gap. I still have 60% to do. I need to bring in my architect and get some more design and get moving towards the value we have promised as the benefit to our users. Details in the general theory of design, of course, especially to my academic friends. I challenge you to find anything remotely like this, just for fun. I couldn't find it. By the way, there are two ways of decomposing stuff to do. And my point here is that the normal way to decompose a big idea is to a set of tasks. And if you do all the tasks, it means, it means now I can implement my strategy. Now, the problem is if that's going to take 1 year, or in some cases 4 years, that's not such a good idea. It violates our ideas of agility in the sense of small incremental result-giving steps. So the trick is to learn to decompose a big strategy into smaller strategies, okay, so that we can try out the big strategy and discover early that it's a bad big strategy. We need to dump the whole damn thing before we spent 2 years and $2 billion on it. Got it? By the way, I've discovered if you instruct Perplexity or something like that, okay, I've reached my 10-minute before the hour level. That's good. So it knows the difference and it will help you do it. I've also learned that people can be taught within one day to do this quite well. Now, I'm going to skip nice stuff, not enough time, but there's nice stuff, nice ideas there. Read it. At the end, I put one of the 14 case studies. Is my method proven in practice? And the answer is yes. For example, at Hewlett-Packard, for more than 10 years, by people working at Hewlett-Packard in the Hewlett-Packard Journal, and by researchers at people like MIT, have proven that my methods work very well. And Hewlett-Packard, this is long before, this is the 1980s and 90s, long before Agile screwed it up with a worse method. Okay, so that's my documentation that this is proven industrially, large scale, provably, documentation, but I didn't sell it to the masses, the unwashed masses who could be fooled into buying a 2-day certification course. I didn't sell it to them. I sold it to big name successful companies who used or use it for decades. Another favorite client, as you'll see, is Intel, and on and on and on. Take a look at that book I cited. End of the talk. So I've got all of 9 minutes to do what I plan to do at the end. Now, by the way, I've got some slides here on doing it but I'm going to try to do it live. Okay. So I'm going to ask, make it easy. I'm going to ask Linda, are you there? Can I hear you?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Linda, I'd like you to think of a client that you might want to use my methods to see how they work and design. So I'm looking for, what country they're in, what industry they're in, stuff like that, whether a startup or mature company or government agency, like USAID or something like that. So name something so that I have to start without preparation.
Okay. My issue is I don't talk about my clients by name.
No, of course not.
A U.S. company that is doing biomedical equipment.
Okay. And are they old established or startup or?
They're old and established.
Okay, so now, could you by any chance see my Perplexity screen here?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Good, everybody can see, okay. Okay, so I just keyed that in. Give me the top 20 critical holders with 3 critical values for each. Okay, so that's my prompt. You get a copy of this afterwards. I got 7 more minutes. All right, so we got patients with 3 values, physicians with 3 values. These are the values I'm talking about in my talk. These are the performance requirements. Healthcare providers, medical, if you look at it like, yeah, common sense. Everybody knows that FDA is pretty damn important for approving their stuff. And they care about regulatory oversight and patient safety, hopefully. Okay. So, okay, there we go. Now that's all done. Now, step 2, quantify the critical initial 10 values in, just a little reminder, scale, meter, tolerable, goal, which, and percentage of stakeholders served, and then references. Give a little list here. Sometimes you don't.
You're doing this in Perplexity.
I'm doing it in Perplexity. I could just as well use ChatGPT or Grok or anything.
Okay.
Okay. Now, notice what it does. It gives me the requirement in Planguage with a defined scale of measure. If you don't like it, change it or ask it to change to something different, but it'll do for instantaneous starters. I'm only 4 minutes into the whole exercise here. Here's how to test or measure this. Here's a tolerable level. Here's a goal level. Here are the stakeholders that would care about. Here's the percentage of stakeholders it would serve. And here are some references. Look at this. To detailed writings on the subject. You try to get that out of a human being in 1 minute. Good luck to you. Okay. So back to perplexity. Okay. Now, done it. Get a copy of this, everybody. Okay. Now, define 10 most powerful strategies for reach the goals on time.
Go up and change missed to most.
You know what I'm going to do? For fun, I'm not going to do it. You know why?
Oh, okay.
It'll figure it out anyway. It's wonderfully tolerant. It's an old habit of ours to try to get these right. It's not necessary. Most powerful for reaching the goals on time, and rate them on an impact estimation table in percentage of goal, and add cap X and op X. Yeah. Okay. So here's our automated designer with 10 ideas. By the way, you can get all the detail you want on these ideas by simply asking for it, but I have limited time. Okay. Here is the percentage of goal achievement. Here is very rough CapEx and OpEx. We can force it to be more detailed. Now, I didn't get exactly what I wanted, so I'm going to go back and get it. Do the IET as all 10 value by 10 plus costs. I still got 2 minutes left on our schedule. There we go. So there we have the values. There we have the strategies. I'd like to have that 90 degrees different, but what the heck? And here we have an impact estimation table giving us, now if you ask how did you arrive at 90%, it will tell you, and it'll do it roughly. If you don't guide it, it'll do it very much more specifically. Key observations, justify, detail your first estimate. You're making a presentation and people say, how do you know that's worth 90%? And there's the justification for the first one, the 80% on achieving the patient satisfaction, which is and you'll find that it's not stupid, it's not hallucinating. It'll give you better sets and more complete sets of reasons than anybody you know, and it'll do it more quickly. And if you aren't using it, your competitor will, and you don't have to go on a 2-day course and get a bogus certification to do this. Done. If I had more time, I'd ask it to decompose this into small steps. Okay, I'll give that to you later, Linda. It's now time for questions. I'm on time. How's that?
Okay. Let me take back the...
Yes. Those are my boys.
Okay. Why did it not show my screen?
I'm seeing your screen.
Okay. There we go.
Right.
Okay. Well, it's time for questions. So at this point, please type your questions into the question area. I will get back to them in just a few minutes. My book, the 3rd edition of the Certified Software Quality Engineer Handbook, just got published the 1st of the year, and that is available from ASQ, from Amazon. Of course, Amazon's the full price. If you're a member of ASQ, you can get the discounted price, which is a significant savings on that book. So if you're looking to get ready for the exam, that's out there. But I think it's a good generic book just on all the topics and subjects from the body of knowledge for software quality engineering. So I wanted to do that without taking up too much time. It is now time for questions. Again, here's my contact information. I pulled an old slide from Tom with all of his contact information. So I'm going to leave this up here while people are asking questions. So let me pull my question box back over. And Niles asks, who in the audience is going to try to apply at least some of this? Now, unfortunately, people can't actually speak, but let me go to the audience area here and hold up your hand if you're going to actually try some or all of this to help answer his question. So anybody going to hold up their hand and try some of this? Either nobody or people don't know how to hold their hand up. I'm going to go try some of it. I actually loved the identification of stakeholders. I've got a client right now who wants me to help them identify their stakeholders, and I'm going to try this and show it to them. Zach says, hopefully not all MBAs are bad people. And Tom, I will admit I do have an MBA. Which,
I won't hold it against you. You're a good person.
Yeah, but if you're going to, okay, Frank just said he's going to try some of it. Steve said he raised his hand. But I am an MBA, but it's because I moved into management, and I'm a firm believer that if you're going to do a job, you ought to be trained to do the job. And I found my MBA very, very useful to me over the years, but not necessarily doing software engineering, but doing the management activities and especially doing things like doing the books for my company and not getting myself in trouble with the IRS. Little things like that are always good. So Frank says he's going to try something. Steve said he raised his hand. So apparently scanning back. Oh, it just took a while. Okay. Zach says he's going to held up his hand. Smithy says he has an MBA as well. He's a good person. Kelly says, I have already been using many of these techniques. So Kelly, give us a little, are they working well for you? Comment. Vicki says she wants to read through the slides and I assume get more ideas and more details.
Yeah, that's natural.
Vicki says, what's in the video VR course?
Oh, I don't know. You have to click it to find out, I think.
Oh, is that my course or?
That's your link.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And
I just assumed it was something from you. VR course.
It is. Sorry, I'll tell you what it is. VR stands for value requirements. And I'll tell you what, if that's going into depth on value requirements, and you will find links to it in the references in our slides. Okay? And if you're missing anything and you can't find it, if you email to me, I will personally be delighted to dig it out and send it to you. Yeah, so VR is if you want to get into depth on those language requirements that I showed you, with the scale and the meter and the goal and all that. It's a whole requirements engineering art unto itself.
And Vicki says, perplexity is fascinating.
Yes. Now, what I've found is that Perplexity, ChatGPT, and Grok are very good at doing this, all of them. Some are better at allowing you to put files in, like a PDF copy of my books is useful. And some are better, like Perplexity, of giving references to really good side references. Some are better at building readable tables, and some are atrocious at it. So I have to, and some will give you free service, and then when you've run out of service that day, you just go to the other ones. It's all free.
Yeah, it's all free, but a limited amount per day.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Well, limited amount of the pro version. It'll actually keep you going on the amateur version, which is good enough for most purposes. So it's essentially all free these days.
Excellent. I
Yeah,
need to get a lot more into AI than I have.
it's fun. I'll bet you your AI avatar or bot knows more about my methods than you think. Ask it.
Can't hurt. But I've trained it with all my books and all my webinars and things.
All
So
right. You are welcome to put my stuff in there for free, all of you. And the PDFs, the free PDFs, are in the references at the back of the slides. So you could train it on stakeholder stuff, or train it on cost engineering, or train it on requirements.
okay, Joseph asks, how do you decide which principles to prioritize? You didn't cover that.
No, that's a good question. Now, I guess you means Joseph, not me, Tom. In a sense, I prioritize all 10 at a time. So they're simultaneously good advice. I don't, I could pick out one as slightly more important than the other. I don't think that's so important. So now, if he has 10 principles for me and he says, which one am I going to start with? It depends, of course, on your needs and your environment, which I don't know. Therefore, I cannot answer. But I would say start with number one and see how it works, or scan through the 10 and pick one that you like. That'll also work fine. Don't worry too much about it. Experiment with them.
And that is our last question. Din Tom, to me, this was fascinating. I really appreciate you coming, and we will continue to invite you to do webinars for our series.
Great.
You always
Notice
have
the
good
first
things to talk
line
about.
here. The first line, it's got my email and it says, feel free to send questions here. So you are going to think about questions later and feel I'm retired. This is my hobby. Send me questions. I'd love to hear from you. I'd also love to hear from the person who said they had experience in using my methods. If I don't already know them, I'd sure like to get acquainted.
Yeah, that was Kelly.
Okay, Kelly,
I'll send you her email address, Tom.
thank you,
If
Kelly.
that's all right with Kelly. Kelly, say
Yeah.
yes, no. Is it okay if I send your email address to Tom so you can make a connection? Okay. Teresa says, Tom, I enjoyed your presentation. I appreciate you sharing this information. Monica says, thank you very much. Great presentation. Haven't heard from Kelly yet.
Okay, if all else fails, Kelly can just email me directly and it's a done thing.
That's true. She can
That's
contact
true.
you.
Anybody else who wants to share what they've done or even share problems like, well, I tried one of your methods and it didn't work very well for me. So it's a matter of sometimes doing it the right way, not a misunderstanding.
Great. Thank you very much again, Tom.
Thanks for inviting me.
And
Pleasure as always.
I will continue to invite you to future webinars depending on our topic.
Great.
And that is it for today's webinar. I will sign off now.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.